Hey guys, appreciate you checking out my YouTube channel. This is a weekend edition, and so that means I will not be talking X's and O's. Instead, I'll be talking about what I think is more important, which is why do we coach? Okay, and so if you haven't been paying attention to a lot of my social media, you may not know, but I'm really excited. I'm about to be releasing my next book, which is called Training Athletes Beyond the Game. And I'm not going to give you a spiel for the whole book. If you're interested, you can go to my website. I believe I'll have pre-orders available in the coming days or so. But I wanted to share a story from that book as today's kind of lesson. Today I want to talk about grit. One of the hardest things that we as coaches have to teach, because it's so difficult to measure and to get into an athlete, is to teach them grit. So the story I want to share with you is a guy that already had it, his name was Colby Sutton. I got to coach at Southside in 2011, and when I came here, they were 0-0 several years in a row for a lot of factors. You know, I'm not into discussing what the factors were. They just were really struggling, new to football. So you had a senior class I was walking into that had never won a game in high school football, and I took over the job. So as you're walking into that from another state without a whole lot of background knowledge, my assumptions on there were that these were going to be kids that weren't going to work hard, that didn't understand what it took, okay, and that probably the reason they weren't winning was they didn't have a lot of grit or a lot of toughness, a lot of heart. Some of that was true. I mean, some of that was accurate, but not very much of it. And the kid I'm going to talk to you about today, his name is Colby Sutton, to me epitomizes grit. He's one of the toughest kids I coached. So you're talking about a kid who had never won a game in high school football. He'd never played really running back much his whole life. So I come in, hadn't had a huge role the year before. I didn't really think he'd have a huge role the year I got there. And the more I watched him play, the more I recognized that, you know, he's 5'10", 160 pounds, not real fast. My goodness gracious, he was one of the most gritty kids I'd ever coached. He had 160 some odd tackles his senior year for us. We had to turn to him to play running back because we had some injuries. He ended up running for 20 touchdowns that season. The last game of the year, we're trying to scratch into the playoffs. He ran the ball 41 times for me. We gave him the ball and just asked him to carry our team as far as he could. He also turned around and had 15 tackles in the same game. This is a kid who had not won a game. It would have been easy for him to have quit at any point, just like that whole class. Never won a game. There wasn't much of a promise of what was going to happen in the future. He didn't even get to play a lot. It's been really easy to do what a lot of kids of this generation do, and that's they quit. Okay? He did it. Okay? He did not quit. He showed tremendous, what I call grit. Grit to me is that innate ability to continue pushing forward when everything in your body and your mind tells you not to push forward. My challenge for us as coaches is, how are we teaching grit to our kids? How are we pushing our kids to be better? As a coach, especially a young coach, I was always infatuated with talent. Kids that had natural ability, I was drawn to them because honestly, they're going to win more games because they have natural ability. The longer I've been at it, natural ability will come and go. And a kid who's naturally talented, of course, may win more games in the short run, but that's not what's going to get your program to the next level if you want to build what is true culture and grit. Taking those kids and allowing them to see that no matter how talented they are or are not, the goal for us is to teach them to push to the maximum ability of their limits. And to teach them how to find true grit, you have to express to them, I care about you enough that I'm going to push you this hard. There's a lot of different ways coaches can be. You can teach grit through extreme difficult circumstances, and that's the only way to really teach it. But you can go about it from a positive aspect where, hey, I care about you so much, we're going to do that. That's what we try to do. Or you can say, we're just going to throw you out there and we're going to be mean to you at all times and just push you this direction. The idea of teaching grit, though, is intentional. Okay, putting a kid through a difficult workout just because you want to show what you can do, that's not really teaching them anything. To teach somebody grit is to explain, I know this hurts, I know this is difficult, and I know you want to quit. Because of that, you're growing. The only way you can teach grit to your kids, and one of the few places left on this planet we can teach it, is on the athletic facilities, where you can push a kid to the breaking point and encourage them to step past it. And that's how you teach grit. I was blessed with Colby, where I walked in, he just had it. He had unbelievable grit. He just needed to be shown you can do more. You can continue to do more. And watching a kid like him inspired me to continue to push the rest of our kids. As a coach, I would highly recommend you identify the kids who are leaders on your team as early as possible. And you start making them into Colbys, kids that are going to show tremendous grit. Because what I learned that season was when he showed that, every kid on the team was going to follow that. Because when your best player is your grittiest player, the rest will follow. And an example of that is this season for us, probably our best player was our running back, similar to Colby, a different kind of guy, but one of the grittiest, toughest players we had. And when all the other players see that your best player has that trait in him, they'll follow. So as a coach, one of the ways I'd recommend you do it is to identify those leaders, push them, explain to them what you're doing. Don't just shove them out there, but explain to them what you're doing and why you're trying to inspire that grit in them. And I'll tell you this, and I learned it back in 2011, and I learned it again in 2019, the gritty teams generally are the teams that overachieve, and they win a lot of games they're not supposed to win, because you've taught those character traits that are going to carry your kids. And going back to that book I'm releasing, they're going to train your athletes beyond the game you have. And those kids are going to succeed far along in life and whatever path they want to go. So as you're coaching, guys, don't forget why we're doing what we're doing, and make sure you are teaching grit to your athletes.